I'm very happy to introduce Elizabeth, who's an abortion storyteller and activist with the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to start by saying thank you for creating a platform, for advocates creating this platform, because ever since I had an abortion, you can't really shut me up about it anymore. Mm-hmm. I've had 2 abortions in my lifetime. The first when I was 21. And I was not involved really in the reproductive health and rights movement at all, but I became pregnant with a partner that I was just casually, intimate with for a little while. And so, when it came out that I was pregnant, I didn't receive any real support from my partner, and I really didn't feel that I could really be open about it. But what is funny is that up until that moment happened, I thought that I was, knowledgeable. I thought that I knew what I was going to do immediately, but I paused. I really did pause and say, what do I want to do? What do I need to do? And when I finally came to the decision and I, was sure of it, and then just thinking back, like I've had morning sickness, of course I'm pregnant, I started looking for an abortion clinic. I started seeing how much it was going to be. I was employed, luckily. Then I had a decent paying job, but I was 21, entry-level position, and I wasn't covered for insurance. The only abortion clinic information that I found was really tough to find online. And I had to have a friend wait for me the entire time. And because this particular clinic only performed abortions 1 day of the week because of security concerns, I had to wait like 8 hours for my abortion. So there were 2 friends of mine that had to come in. One had to come in and then one had to leave. I paid $535 out of pocket, and we've all been at entry-level 21-year-old jobs. That is not easy to come by. And I was there, and they put me under completely. I similarly was in a room with a bunch of people in there waiting for their procedure. And there was just a culture of silence, there were people sitting down, and one young woman was crying, and I didn't even feel like I wanted to tell her it's gonna be okay, but I couldn't. Procedure itself took like 15 minutes tops, and I came to, and for some reason I was crying. I think it was just the reaction to the anesthesia. And then I walked out, and my friend was there, and I remember the clinic staff not being totally warm, but one security guard in particular, as I was walking out the door, put his hand gently on my shoulder. And like that type of empathy and compassion is kind of like the reason that I share my abortion story now. And in addition to like seeing the barriers, and like walking up to a building with like blacked out windows and a cop at the front. I mean, like, I'm an immigrant. I'm from Mexico. I was undocumented when I, first came to the United States. I can only imagine, having to present ID at a building can be totally intimidating. You're already going into a procedure where it's already so stigmatized and so, people don't really know how easy and safe the procedure is. So after that, I was like, I'm not going to shut up about this. Like, this has made me an activist. I saw all the stigma around it. I was like, no, not on my watch. I'm going to talk about it. But it took me a while to get there. It was not until I was like 25 until I got to know 1 in 3 and Advocates for Youth. And I was then volunteering with an organization, with a clinic in Georgia, where I had my procedure called the Feminist Women's Health Center. And I'm so thankful for that organization, because it really brought me to a place where I was okay. I became an advocate. And then 12 years later, or 10 years later, 11 years later, I had my second abortion, and it was completely different because I was employed with insurance that covered it. I only paid a copay. My partner then, my live-in partner, supported me. I was able to tell my boss, like, I'm not coming in today because I'm going to go have an abortion. It was just casual. It was something that I never imagined at 21 could really come full circle. But so even now, in places like this where I share my story and I talk about like the stark differences between my first one and my second one, now I live in New York. So, We have far more progressive policies in New York than we did in Georgia when I had my first one. But just the environment, just being around people where I could talk about it, where I could express my feelings, whether they were like, yeah, I'm just going to have an abortion today, or talk about, my first experience where I was quite, it was a tough decision to make when I thought it might be easy. But I think more than anything, walking away from this and thinking about the reasons that I had my first abortion and the reasons I had my second abortion, it just reminds me of like my parents, and like my mom, and thinking about like this small little environment that you're in, and you're coming from a different country and you seem, totally isolated. You don't speak the language, you're not, most people aren't really like healthcare, don't have healthcare literacy in general. And then for you not to speak the language, it's kind of double difficult for you to kind of access and advocate for yourself. But that was kind of my experience, and I'm super grateful to have had that accessible to me.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I hope that you never stop advocating, because it was wonderful to hear from you today, Elizabeth.
Thanks.